I mean, national security law has just saved Hong Kong from the chaos. I mean, it's the best thing that happened in Hong Kong. If there was no national security law in Hong Kong, I would have left Hong Kong. I needed national security law to be protected myself. We should actually thank Joshua Wong. I mean, Joshua Wong, thank you, because of you, we got the national security law. And actually, when we enacted national security law, that is the real handover, because it was still colonized.
Hello everybody, this is Jingjing. So today joining me in a conversation is Angelo Giuliano. He is a Swiss Italian that have been living in China for a really long time. So Angelo, how are you?
Jing, nice to be on your show.
How long have you been living in China in total?
So I studied in Taiwan and I studied in the mainland. So basically, since 25 years, I've been living most of the time in China, and the last 3 years in Hong Kong. I studied in Fudan University and Yunnan University, and I have a financial background, so I'm a financial consultant. So what was my journey into politics, into Hong Kong? It's very special, and it took me time just to start to speak out. At the beginning, as a foreigner, I thought of myself as being an outsider, and I thought that Hong Kong was an internal matter. It was a matter of Chinese, so I didn't join in. It was just a spectator, just watching. And up to a point where I saw what was really behind this movement. Because I have studied the colored revolution in Maidan, Ukraine revolution, and I used to live in Venezuela. And when I saw what was happening in Hong Kong, it was like really a chilling effect. I was like, we need to speak out to tell the world what is happening, because this could turn into a new Syria. It could turn like extremely, extremely bad. So there was a few triggers that made me decide to speak out. I think one of the worst time is that when I saw this journalist in the airport, the journalist from Global Times, I saw him and he was tied up. They tied him up. They were holding him and beating him, and I was very shocked because nobody came out and tried to help him. And then I saw the beatings of mainland Chinese, in Hong Kong. I mean, really random. And when I saw the reasons of beating was just because the single facts that they were mainlanders speaking Mandarin, they were beaten up. Or in other cases, just for the single fact of speaking out, just saying, you speak out, you have different ideas and you speak out and you get beaten up. And then I studied more the situation, exactly who were the actors, and especially where the funding came from, because I think the key elements is the funding, so I realized, well, like I studied the whole thing. I took the basic law and I was looking at the request. Okay, they're looking for democracy. Okay, then they're telling us all lots of things about China, that China didn't respect the one country two system. And when I look into facts, every time it was all about lies. And I was also very shocked about the medias. They were extremely biased. You would see 95% of the time, they were just filming the police. So the cameras, they were just looking at the police, but you would never see the cameras turning towards the writers and filming the beating of people, writers throwing stones, throwing cocktail Molotovs. So at some point I decided that I wanted to speak out and just really tell the world what is happening, the truth about what is happening in Hong Kong. And especially I think I wanted also to make them face their contradictions, because I have a political background. I used to do politics in Switzerland. Switzerland is a very special model. It's direct democracy, and I think it's working extremely well. So because of that, I wanted to explain to them that what they were looking for was not democracy. They were actually going completely against democracy. A fundamental right in democracy, it's about allowing people that don't agree with your thinking, allowing them to speak out. And we were not allowed. People that, there's a silent majority in Hong Kong who was never given the right to speak out. There's different reasons. Once, I think one of the reasons is that they were afraid to be of the doxing. Doxing is when they put your picture in the social media, they put your address, and they start threatening you. And they did it to me. They did it to me. They put the picture of my son.
They did it to you?
So that got me really angry. So and so there's the doxing, and so I think there's an element which is really important to understand in Hong Kong, is that there's a silent majority which is not interested in politics. I think Hong Kongese, they're very down to earth. I think Hongkongese, the reality they're facing in Hong Kong are different from seeking whatever concept of freedom and democracy. Average people are struggling through a tough life in Hong Kong. It means, you need to pay the bills. It's very competitive. There's the income inequalities and so on. And it's about making money. And so now you have a new generation of kids who were brainwashed by medias and by, I would say, like the West, Western ideals. And they didn't learn about history. They don't know exactly that they are being manipulated by the West. And they are just pawns, So when they are, I think it's a shame because it's destroying Hong Kong society. Besides the riots and all the damage to properties that happen in Hong Kong, what happens is that there were lots of families destroyed. People, like couples that divorced, because the purpose of a colored revolution, it's about polarizing society. And it was about, you are either with us or you are against us. So it was, you had the clan, the Blue Clan, which was pro-China, and you had a pro-independence clan, which was called the Yellow Clan. So you had yellow and blue, but you didn't have a green area, something in between, more rational to say, well, you know what, it's not either or, it's about compromising, exchanging, and not using violence. It's very emotional. Politics can be very emotional. But I really thought I weighed the pros and cons. And I thought that the best teaching I could give to my son was to be able to say, well, you know what, my son, when the time was right, I speak out. And this is the best teaching I can do. It's starting from yourself, we say in Chinese, we say, 从个人做起. We need to set up the example. It's by our actions. It's not about empty talk. It's about our actions. And I think also when you're a certain age, I'm 50 years old now, I think there are other priorities. It's not about myself. I don't care about, showing off or whatever. I think it's about more as a human being. Just being able to say, well, you know what, stop, because the directions Hong Kong is going into is going to be chaos and nobody will win there.
But you mentioned that because you stood out and speak up for something that just not in line with what protesters say, and so they, dug out information about your son. What happened to you exactly?
Well, it's a difficult topic. It's very sensitive, especially when it touches your family. But they expose pictures of my son. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm so sorry, Angelo. Were your family all fine during that time, during the chaotic period? Take some time. I totally understand. it's kind of unbelievable. Just because you are saying something that you believe, you stand out to criticize their wrongdoings. But
Jing
yeah.
Jing, you know what? I was, you know, I think it was very painful, but at some point, I think, to be honest, I think when it came to me, they messed up with the wrong person because I'm not afraid. So this was a further trigger. You know, it made me realize that they have no morals and they are extremely vicious. It's extremely vicious. So what happened after this, I had to change my habits. So for 1 year, I would just avoid some areas in Hong Kong. So I would just like have a safe route, you know, from my home. I never disclosed, you know, the interviews I had, I would never disclose to anyone where I was living. Actually, I started to avoid to go out in family. I started to wear a cap and wear a mask, you know, and sunglasses in some areas which were sensitive. But I really realized that because of that, you know, there was much more at stake. You know, it was not about me. It was about, you know, like really telling the people, this is extremely vicious. When you have inhuman behavior like this, and especially when they managed to the radicals took over the movements, and no matter how evil the things they were doing, nobody was condemning what they were doing. It was extremely scary, you know. You know, you saw many interviews of those radicals, and whenever they ask you, well, why are you condemning putting one person on fire, and they would not answer. And I think this has nothing to do with the democracy or you know, it's just inhumane. You want to destroy Hong Kong, and I think it's very childish, you know, when they have slogans like, if we burn, you burn with us. You know, Benny Tai, you saw, I mean, what is happening these days when they try to put Hong Kong into chaos by the so-called 10-step to mutual destruction. How childish, how evil is this movement?
But isn't that ironic? Because they claim they wanted the freedom of speech, but when you say something different from them, they attacked you, they threatened you. So they are taking your freedoms away. They are jeopardizing your freedom, your human rights. How is that fair?
Well, I think, Jinjin, we need to look at the whole context of Hong Kong. It's important to understand that who are the actors. You know, whenever you see those rioters, the people in the front, those are just actors. They are just pawns. They are pawns. What is behind is much more complex. You need to understand that they've been pouring money into Hong Kong for creating chaos, for creating this Hong Kong colored revolution. So this started already before 1997. It was not done, and it's a very gradual approach. So I saw the behavior. You know, I was in 1997 in Hong Kong, the day of the handover, so I could feel the vibes. The vibes, you know, I could feel, you know, some apprehension of Hong Kong people and so on. But from 1997, for 10 years, I saw this relationship with the mainland to be pretty good. You know, it was very beneficial to Hong Kong. You need to understand that Hong Kong is what it is because of China, because Hong Kong otherwise has nothing. It's an entry door. They're doing service, but there's nothing. There's no electricity. There's no water. You know, it all comes from China. So Hong Kong is what it is just because of China, and and throughout history, if you learn history, it was always part of China. But what happened is that, so since 25 years ago, they started pouring money into Hong Kong society, and they started what I would call brainwashing the kids and telling a different history. So I think it's very easy with the kids. You need to imagine some kids growing to in Hong Kong, they watch like Apple Daily, you know, like what I would call trash media, because it's only trash media. It's bagua. Bagua. The school education systems, the teachers' unions is is penetrated by the National Endowment for Democracy. So when you go, you have a teacher that tells you, oh, you know what, it's okay to destroy Hong Kong. So this whole brainwashing. It takes one generation. So you had the kids in Hong Kong having a certain version of what should be Hong Kong, very westernized and very biased towards China. And then you had their parents, which had a very different understanding of Hong Kong. Their parents, they experienced Hong Kong under the colonial system. And before 1997, there was no democracy in Hong Kong. And in some ways, Hong Kong, the British were extremely, very racist towards Chinese. They forget, there was some ordinance, some laws that didn't allow Chinese to go to certain places in Hong Kong. So it was extremely, there was no freedom and there was no democracy. So those kids, they idealize Hong Kong being under British rule, which is completely absurd. And then they have completely, they have absolutely no understanding what is democracy. Democracy, it's extremely complex. We see around the world lots of the so-called democracy, which are fake democracy and are failing because there are some preconditions to democracy. I like to say that preconditions to democracy is no interference of money into democracy. It's about education. You need to educate people into democracy, meaning one of the examples is that if you want democracy, you need to allow people to speak out if they have different ideas. And then it's about compromising. And then you need also unbiased media. And what happened in Hong Kong was that they didn't have the preconditions for democracy. When you have 80% of the media which are anti-Chinese, it's already, it makes democracy very difficult. So, and then you see, they always criticize the one country two system. They say that China is not respecting one country two system. It's actually exactly the opposite. In the basic law, which is the small constitution, Hong Kong Constitution, there was an Article 23, which is related to national security law. And it was supposed to be enacted 23 years ago. And because of opposition, they never enacted this national security law. And this is why Hong Kong had become a platform, a CIA platform, where you had hundreds of agents that were into Hong Kong, that just preparing for chaos. Because everything that happened in Hong Kong didn't happen overnight. It was a slow preparation. It took 20 years to do that.
Okay, so we talk about, you mentioned the silent majority in Hong Kong, but I know you have been very vocal about Hong Kong issues. You spoke against the protesters. We follow each other on Twitter for a really long time. I saw your emotional speech on the stage. You put yourself or your family in danger, but why you chose to stand out and speak up? Why you want to no longer remain silent?
I think I think it's at the local level. Hong Kong is my home. I wanted to protect my home. Somehow I can be a foreigner in China, but also I think it's also my home. When you spend 25 years in a country, you actually create a special bond. So I wanted to protect my home, but on the same time, because I experienced a colored revolution abroad, I thought that it was my responsibility, because I saw how bad this can turn out. I saw this as being my responsibility to speak out, and what I call the silent majority recently people started to speak out, but because there's less threat. you know, you need to understand that the national security law now is starting to protect people like me and other people from the silent majority. There's one thing which is really important for people to understand, that there was a petition. There was signed by 3 million people in Hong Kong in favor of the national security law. Can you imagine? 3 million people signed this petition, and we didn't see this news in the Western media. It's just disgusting. It's just disgusting. 3 million. We're talking about 60-70% of people are backing the national security law because they know this is extremely important to protect Hong Kong. If we don't have this national security law, Hong Kong it could turn into chaos. So then I think it's individuals. We're all different, you know. I think when it comes to justice, my personality makes me just to speak out. I cannot accept injustice. But again, you know, like a lot of people, it's very hard to get the real information. Look it from a foreigner who's watching like a Western media. Unless you are in Hong Kong and you are really looking, you are in the middle of the riots and you're looking at what is happening, it's very hard. You know, if I was to watch BBC, I would be like, what the CPC is doing in Hong Kong? But then if you scratch a little bit the surface and then you go into facts, really facts, you know, I've never had a debate with someone from the other camp about the facts, just looking at, you know, articles of law, you know. When I asked the question, tell me one thing that Beijing didn't respect in the one country two system. And very often they have no arguments. And I think, you know what they do? They shut you out. They say, oh, is it the CPC that is paying you? Or what do they say? Oh, you are a foreigner, you don't know. Or, you know, but they shut you out. But when you talk about facts and logic, they shut down. They say, oh, we are losing freedom. And I'm like, okay, well, can you explain to me? I mean, because freedom is very intangible. Can you tell me your freedom, you know, the freedom, you know, they're curtailing a little bit of the freedom right now, but you know which freedom they're curtailing? The CPC, I mean, Beijing is starting to tell people in Hong Kong, well, you know what? You cannot burn flags. You cannot insult China. But you know what? If you burn a flag in Germany, there's a new law in Germany which says that you can go to jail for 1 year if you burn a flag. So is it the freedom they're looking for? Because if you go into the street in Hong Kong right now, I don't know if you are familiar with the sect Falun Gong. You know, Falun Gong is a sect. I did some research, but it's a sect that is financed by the USA and the CIA, right? By National Endowment for Democracy.
Like this evil cult is, wow, I can make a speech about this cult. But go on, like I hate it so much because they're just so evil, making chaos everywhere. They killed so many Chinese people long time ago when I was a kid. It was very popular in China back then. So I saw how this cult growing, destroying people's lives, killed so many Chinese, and then like finally the government banned it, and then they ran away to America, being the puppet for American government. Now they pretend they are like being religious refugees that's suppressed by CPC, which is just funny. And Mike Pompeo just portraying Falun Gong as a religion just the same as Islam, as Christian, as Buddhism. What a huge insult to compare Falun Gong with Buddhism, with Christian and Muslims. That's a huge insult to all the Muslims, Christians, and Buddhists. I mean, well, okay, that's just my rant. Yeah. But continue what you're gonna say.
No, it's complete hypocrisy. But you know, I took the example of Falun Gong because if you go to Hong Kong right now, well, there's Falun Gong everywhere. So Falun Gong right now, you know, even the most evil propaganda is being allowed in Hong Kong. So, you know, even national security law allows Falun Gong to be everywhere in Hong Kong. And by the way, you know, in their teaching, they're teaching some good stuff, some stuff which is related to meditation, but they are manipulating, Buddhism for their evil purpose. I do meditation. I come from a yoga background too, and I think it's extremely evil. How can you associate your propaganda with Buddhism and meditation? I mean, it's extremely evil.
Like, what's the problem that led to the chaotic situations in 2019 in Hong Kong? What's the problems that you saw?
Well, there's the official, what the writers said, it was about a law of extradition law, and it was completely manipulated. It was just, Hong Kong has extradition laws with many different places around the world. So it was completely manipulated. It was just an excuse that they were looking for. And at the end, the true natures came out, but it takes time. The true nature was a sedition. It was about sedition. It was about, independence movement. But what happened at the beginning, I think there are some problems in Hong Kong. I mean, we shouldn't, I have to admit, I mean, some of the problems are related to wealth inequalities, but Beijing has never intervened because they wanted Hong Kong to solve those problems. If Beijing, if it was a system similar to what is happening, to what they do in mainland China, I think Beijing would manage much better Hong Kong. But because Beijing wanted to respect the one country, two system, then a lot of problems like income inequalities could not be solved. And I think there's one thing which is also very important is that I mentioned foreign interference, but also there's a problem in Hong Kong is the tycoons. There are some monopolies in Hong Kong, and some old families are there, and they're taking lots of benefits because of those monopolies. So for them, some actually have been financing the riots, and some have been playing both sides. I mean, Li Kai-shek is a good example. Some of them are very afraid of 2047, and the riots are maybe a bargaining chips for them to negotiate the transition, because they've been getting very, very wealthy because of the system in Hong Kong, and they're just afraid that those monopolies would be dismantled in 2047.
What do you make of national security law? Because there's a huge debate in Hong Kong and also on international media. But for you, as someone who lived in Hong Kong for a really long time and saw the long protests in Hong Kong, what do you make of national security law?
From my personal experience and situation, if there was no national security law in Hong Kong, I would have left Hong Kong. I needed national security law to be protected myself. I mean, imagine how important it was. So I think it's very important for people living there, but also for the business community. You need to have certain kind of stability, and keep in mind that national security law can be found everywhere around the world. So this national security law in Hong Kong is no different from what you can find anywhere else in the world. And it's not, it's not very complicated. I mean, no foreign interference, protecting sovereignty. I mean, this is very basic stuff. When you have countries that are coming to Hong Kong and pointing a finger at the national security law, it's just hypocrisy. Those are the ones that were financing the riots. So it's just a hypocrisy. And we need to put this into perspective of a proxy war. Hong Kong is just a proxy war, USA and China. I want to add another thing, which is very, very important to better understand. Behind this the riot movement, there was the DPP of Taiwan. Tsai Ing-wen, before the riots, she had only 30% of support. She was completely failing. So the DPP has been helping this movement, and because of the riots, she won the elections. And the DPP behind it You know, it's completely hijacked by the National Endowment for Democracy, which, by the way, National Endowment for Democracy, they just opened an office in Taipei. So Taiwan right now has its own democracy, which is hijacked by the USA. So for China, it's important to understand that for China, it was very important to show the world and to show Taiwan that one country, two system could work. So it was very damaging for the US and Taiwan to show that Hong Kong, one country, two system, was success. So they needed to make it look like a failure. So you could actually promote an independence movement in Taiwan. And I think this is extremely, extremely important. And I think I feel so bad because in some ways, the DPP has won there. They have won, you know. And then if you look back, well, the writers in Hong Kong, they were just pawns. They were just pawns. They were being used by Taiwan independence movement and the USA, just pawns. You know, how can, and this is what I wanted to tell them. Just at least know the whole geopolitics behind this. There's nothing to do with democracy and freedom, etc. You have all the freedom you want in Hong Kong. I mean, in Hong Kong, it is ranked number 3 in the Human Freedom Index. I mean, how much more freedom do you want? I mean, really. And they were also demonizing Hong Kong police. I mean, in general, you know, I'm not for police, you know, I mean, but then when I come to Hong Kong and I see how good is the police, it's the best police in the world. You should be proud to have this type of police. Extremely, I mean, they're really good. You know, whenever I go to a policeman and, you know, ask for direction and so on, you know, they so, you know, they are civil servants. It's not like in the US. I mean, the US, if the riots happen in the US, you could imagine hundreds of rioters being killed by the US American police.
We already saw some of the, like, how they treated the protesters, the rioters, in the past few riots happening in America. So, like, what America is backing in the past few years is really biting them in the ass, I think.
But you know, I like to use the, you know, like this saying, Chinese saying, you know, 贤在富中不知福. This is what Hong Kongese should realize. I mean, those writers, they don't realize that they are in extremely amazing place, because Hong Kong is an amazing place. You know, they're in the middle of, this is happiness. This is, you know, this prosperity. It's not, you know, of course, there are things that you could improve, but why are you destroying your home? You know, when they're writing like this and destroying everything, the MTR and so on, it's the same as if I'm at home, I'm angry, and I'm spitting on my floor. Does it make sense? I'm spitting on my own floor. Does it make sense? It's absurd. It is absurd, really. You know, and I think we will look back in 10 years' time, and I think people will live with shame, because it's a huge shame. Can you imagine when they're telling, oh, well, we are not Chinese, we are Hong Kongese. I mean, you are insulting your parents. You are insulting your ancestors. Imagine your ancestor, your grandfather, listening to what you are saying. Because you know where they came from? They came from Sichuan, from Guangdong, from everywhere. Waves of Chinese, and they were always Chinese. How can you have a flag, a British flag? How insulting is that? How insulting. When you learn about history and you see that in some parks, Chinese and dogs were not allowed. This is insulting. It's insulting. So,
very well said, Angelo.
You know, Jingjing, we call this the Stockholm syndrome. You know, yeah. They have been enslaved by their white masters, and they love better their white masters than the motherland. You know, I take the difference. You know, like I like to compare. You know, a casual friend. The U.S. is a casual friend. just using you for evil purpose. And China is the mother of Hong Kong. There is this eternal bond. 这个叫难见难分的关系. You will never cut this bond. And you know what? China loves you. So I like to use this metaphor, you know, like sometimes with the son and the mother, you can have, you know, disagreements, conflicts. But you know what? Your mother will be always your mother. And she cares for you. So sometimes, you know, this, okay, we don't understand each other. Well, let's sit down. But, you know, you only have one mother. The rest, you know, the US, UK, they're just using you. You know, they throw you away. Once they've used you, you're no one. You know, they said, you know, like the England invited like the BNO holders, passport holders, to come to to England, but then they make it very difficult. I mean, how many Hong Kong people left for the UK? No one. So you know, it was just empty promise from the West. You know, oh, you know, come to the US, come to, you know, even Taiwan. You know, Taiwan at the beginning, they say to those rioters, oh, you know what, you can be refugee in Taiwan, and now they say, well, no, it's okay, we don't want you. They've been used.
There's a discussion about patriots governing Hong Kong. Some say that's because CPC want absolute control of Hong Kong. Some say, well, they require loyalty rather than love for Hong Kong. What do you make of this patriots governing Hong Kong? Do you think that's necessary?
I think it's more like loyalty. I think sometimes we need to be very careful about wording. Patriot, sometimes might be just too strong as a word in English. I think it's more about loyalty. So you are not going to conspire with Western foreign powers. You know, I mean, it's a minimum of not. You know, you cannot have people in LegCo which are not loyal to Beijing. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, you need to protect the one country before talking about the two systems. You know, I think a lot of people in Hong Kong, they've been focusing too much on the two systems, and they forgot that you need a prerequisite to two systems is to protect the one country. You know, you cannot always, you know, do some barking about the two system and say, oh, it's not respecting two system and so on, while you are conspiring with the West and you are asking for sanctions to Hong Kong. You know, asking for sanctions, you live in Hong Kong and you're asking the West for sanctions. How stupid is that? In Chinese, we call 打自己的腿. You're hitting on your own foot, right? I mean, how stupid is that, you know? But you know, it's easy. You know, you see like the same as example as Hong Kong. The Joshua Wong in Hong Kong is the Navalny in Russia, is the Juan Guaido in Venezuela. And those are traitors. I mean, those are, you know, they just get paid, you know, they are a hero for the day, but they will live a life of infamy. Because treason towards your motherland, there's no worse than that. How can you look at yourself in the mirror when you've done such a treason?
They probably think whoever is supporting them, like the Americans, politicians, whoever is giving them monies will protect them, will give them American citizenship, will make sure. So even though they ask for sanctions for Hong Kong, but they think, well, it doesn't matter to me because I can run away to America, live a better life, and leave all you suckers back to Hong Kong. So I think that's what they think. But they are just being used. Once their job is finished, they will get dumped. The one that being very vocal, very supportive to Joshua Wong is the first one that vote no to provide refugee for Hong Kongers. So you see, they use them, but they don't want them to come to America.
Yeah, you know, I like to use the example. You know, there's in all those protesters, there's a few ones that actually are going to benefit from that. You know, I mean, you know, one example is Nathan Law. Nathan Law got got access to Yale, right? And there's a joke there that they say, well, Nathan Law is going to Yale, the rest are going to jail.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, how stupid is that? You're backing, you are writing and so on, but you know what? You are going to jail. It's very funny. They like, all those protesters, they like to use the term rule of law. And CPC is not respecting rule of law and so on. I mean, how absurd is that? You are beating up people, you are destroying property. You are the one not respecting the rule of law, you know. So again, I mean, national security law has just saved Hong Kong from the chaos. I mean, it's the best thing that happened in Hong Kong. And actually, I think when I look at the whole process, how we came to the national security law, well, imagine there was a small thing, it started from the extradition law, which was a small achievement for Hong Kong and Beijing. It was a small thing, right? But then we got a big win, checkmate with the national security law. Because imagine, you were asking for small candy, but then you got a big pizza. You see what I mean? Because the national security law, it's the win-win for Hong Kong and Beijing. We should actually thank Joshua Wong. I mean, Joshua Wong, thank you, because of you, we got the national security law. And actually, I think that Hong Kong finally is being decolonized. The handover didn't happen in 1997. The handover happened when we enacted national security law. That is the real handover, because it was still colonized.